Hello, friends. On air from Nashville, it's me, Ruth Rosen.
And on air from Seattle, it's me, Tim Tackett. In today's Let It Be podcast episode, we're going to be talking about the journey. Our journeys matter. The journey isn't always a straight line. It loops, pauses, and sometimes breaks. Ruthe and I had a 6-year gap in our relationship. Life pulled us apart, but growth, time, and grace brought us back together, right here, right now, to create something meaningful with this podcast. Our greatest impact often comes from our most honest places, especially the messiest moments. Our story, our strengths, our talents, they matter. Today, we invite you to meet us, get to know us, and walk alongside us as we navigate this new podcast with compassion and courage.
Oh my goodness. Okay. A lot of mornings we have spent planning, and it's our first episode.
It's been really great and a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to the journey.
And think about it. Our listeners are now a part of our journey.
Let's dive into the foundation. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing for the last, 2 decades?
2 decades, yes. Just like the morning of February 6th, I asked God to help me get out of bed today, and also, most importantly, show me how I can live the next 40 years without Carla. And 13 months later, we started the Let It Be Foundation. And the Let It Be Foundation was our life, our family's life, and I gave it my all. I didn't think it would ever end. I didn't see an ending in sight when God laid the vision on my heart. But it's okay to let go, and that's where we're at. And this podcast wouldn't be happening if I didn't experience the letting go process.
You know, that was in 2006 that your journey started with the foundation. That was the beginning for you, and look at where you are now.
With you and all of our listeners. So we had a little gap there, Tim.
I still can't believe it was 6 years. You keep saying 6 years, and it felt like it was not. But here we are now, and I'm excited about this podcast and the people that are going to join us and listen and hopefully ask to join us on the show.
Sharing their personal strengths, their stories, their learned wisdom. Cannot wait to get some guests in the studio.
So I know we're still recovering from our
Yes,
time
we
apart,
are.
but it's pretty cool that we haven't really even skipped a beat.
So let's share with our listeners a little bit about how this podcast came together and why we have decided to tap into the learned wisdoms that I had written in my book that I released in 2010, Never Give Up.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, I just want to share with our listeners how this came to be, because I think this is just so organic and beautiful, and definitely, I believe, something that God had been working on during that gap for us. So I'm going to start it by saying that Tim and I had not seen each other in over 6 years. I think we had a couple of texts that were related to Mom, or I would text you, Happy Birthday, Merry Christmas, but often you didn't even respond. So Tim and I are sitting there. He agreed to come with Mom to celebrate my 60th birthday here in Nashville. And I hadn't seen him, and his hair was a little grayer, but still as handsome as ever. And we were sitting the first morning, and Mom was still sleeping. We were playing crib, having coffee. And you seriously said to me, Ruthe, I have something I need to share with you. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Is he sick? Is his marriage okay? Is there something going on that he's just going to lay it out there right there for me? And I said, okay. So you said to me, I never read your book. I laughed. I'm like, that was it? Okay. No big deal,
25
Tim.
years later.
Yeah, exactly. It's no big deal. But what you said next is what I believe for me is permanently stamped in my heart. and I believe has begun the journey of this podcast. Why don't you share?
Deciding to come out to Nashville to celebrate your birthday wasn't really part of the plan, but I ended up having some other plans fall through, and I knew it was important for Mom, and that was what was driving me, was to make our mom happy, and I know that meant a lot to her. So the next step is I'm sitting on the couch and just kind of thinking, and lost in my thoughts, and I look over at my bookshelf and I see my old Bible that Mom and Dad had bought me, and
And I
I'm
didn't even know you
spiritual.
owned a Bible.
I know. I think I maybe even forgot that I had owned a Bible, and I consider myself agnostic, which is another thing we'll discuss later on. But I went over and I opened up the Bible and I just started thumbing through it and reading some scriptures, and all of a sudden there's a picture of Carla, and then I flip the page and there's a letter that Carla had written me before I flew out at some point and to see you guys in California. And I started thinking about it, and then I see where I had pulled the Bible out, I see your book. And I pulled that off the shelf and I started to read it. And there's more pictures in there. And I'm just like, what is going on? This is crazy. So I started reading your book and I got through a couple chapters and I am just crying uncontrollably on the couch. And I think I was leaving a couple days later to come see you. So I packed the book with me intending to finish it. And I read it on the plane. And the air waitress, what's the stewardess? I don't know what you call her.
Air waitress? Oh my gosh, Tim. Flight attendant.
Flight
Wow.
attendant.
You're going to get our podcast canceled from the first day.
So she comes over because I'm crying and I'm in the aisle seat, and I'm sure no one's really watching me, but if they were, they would see this grown man weeping on the airplane, and the flight attendant came over and was like, "Are you okay?" And like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a little emotional here." And about 5 minutes before we landed, I finished the book, and it took me on this incredible journey of you and Carla and Michael and the boys and Rick, and this was very impactful and meaningful to me to read that. And I have my own experience of what happened, but to be able to kind of relive it through your eyes, and it was very meaningful, and I think that's what I wanted to tell you. So I know I dropped a ball saying I gotta talk to you, but just wanted you to know how impactful that was to me.
And something you said to me, Tim, was, I'm sorry I was not there for you. And right there, our 6-year gap was removed. So I believe that's where God started working on us. But we didn't know it because I had the foundation and we had a big celebration because it was all about me that weekend. That week, actually, you were here for 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had the best time. And that morning, we followed up with a little walk. And that was the first time you and I ever talked about God together. And I was so excited to just start each morning and walk and talk about God with you. And then you flip and stub your toe, broke it. and we couldn't have our walks and talks. And I think, though I missed it and that time together, I think it was just all part of the plan. You just have a way of bringing love in my heart, and I just want to thank you for that. So I know that's mushy and gushy, and y'all don't want to hear that too, brother and sister. But I think what you don't know about Tim and I is we were never raised together. So we're going to get into this on a future podcast. But when I was 19, I searched out and found my biological mom, who we call Mom, my birth mom.
And sometimes mother.
Sometimes, oh, don't call her that. So when I found Melinda, Mom, I was 19 and I met Tim for the first time when he was 5 years old. So Tim and I were never raised together, but I was the older sister, and we managed to have a beautiful relationship when we were together. And on the first time, I know you all can't see this, but the first time I met Tim. He drew me this picture. I knew that I wanted to surprise you with this, and you
What is that?
think it's a fox. I was not allowed to have a relationship with mom because my mom who adopted me, who is my mom, she went to heaven in 2008, but I had to keep the relationship secret. So I have this folder, and this is what I had to secretly carry in my car, and it's made it through life. And I only have a few things in here, but your picture was one of them, because I remember you didn't really know what to think of me, and all of a sudden you came running in the kitchen and you handed me this picture. And I knew right then and there we were going to have a relationship, and all my worries of you accepting me was going to be just fine. So that's how Tim and I are connected. I would find out later our mom put me up for adoption at birth, and she didn't even get to hold me. And then about a year and a half later, she put another child up for adoption, another circumstance, which we will dive into. And then she found the love of her life, Dougie, and they went to have children, and she had an ectopic pregnancy, could not have kids of her own, so she had to adopt. Tim is adopted. I'm adopted. We share the same mom, but we are not blood brother and sister. Doesn't matter. Our love and our hearts for one another and our mom. It's definitely been a rocky road over
That's
this
family.
last family. What family
Yeah,
isn't? Correct.
that's family.
So Michael and I just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary. I have 4 kids. 2 are in heaven. 2 are right here in Nashville. Are you married? Do you have kids?
You know I don't have kids.
But the listeners did not know.
Bethany, my wife, and I have known each other since 1996. We've been married for 15 years. So, we didn't get married right away.
So you're
love of my
considered a
life.
dink. You're considered a dink.
I am a dink, yes. Dual income, no kids. But I think the biggest difference between us is our faith. And you being religious and me being agnostic, I can't say that there is no God. I don't know that, which is
There
why it's
is.
so meaningful to talk to you and get your point of view on things. And that's something that we're going to explore through our episodes.
And I'm looking forward to it. I am hopeful. What you'll see in me, and our listeners will as well, is Tim, it's not about being religious. It's about having a relationship with God. So that I cannot wait to dive into. This is a great transition into why did we call it the Let It Be podcast. When Tim and I started scheduling regular meetings, Sunday mornings, I love it. You said it's okay if we do Sunday, the Lord's Day. Absolutely, we can. We started meeting and planning, and we didn't know what our name was going to be. Everything about it, we let God lead. And what we realized is we started talking about faith, understanding, acceptance. We started talking about all of this, and we realized that we were defining Let It Be. And though the Let It Be Foundation closed its doors in December of 2024, Let It Be is still my journey. So we decided it's still the journey.
It absolutely has meaning. And I think doing what we can to honor Carla and the message that she gave to all of us, and what an amazing person she was. And
Well, let me get out my handy dandy little file. Look at that.
Oh my God.
Look at that picture.
Kids.
Who's that with your little Birkenstocks and your socks?
And
He
my
was really
socks.
cool. And
Man,
she's a
that
California girl.
smile.
She's barefooted.
Yep, that smile.
Look at that. Look
That's
at that
great.
smile. We talk about Carla and the journey, and there's lots of people who I think our first listeners are definitely going to be people who maybe know our story, or maybe it's some of people that you've met along the way who don't know our story, Tim. I wanted to read some words out of the book, if that's okay. Never had the 3 of us yelled and cried so much. It was after midnight when, exhausted, we all hugged and promised to work harder to get along, and finally said goodnight. The following morning, I woke up in a panic. We had all overslept. Carla's first class was at 6:15 a.m., and it was now 7. But when I ran into her room to wake Carla, she said, "Mom, my head hurts. It feels like it's going to explode." What I wanted to say was, "I'll get you some aspirin and get you to school." But I caught myself before speaking because we had just agreed to understand one another better. I got Carla the aspirin. I told her to go back to sleep. I called the pediatrician and made an appointment for that afternoon. As we walked into the doctor's office, Carla whispered to me, "I never took my prescription from last time, but don't tell him." Between that information, all the crying we had done the night before, the headache seemed to make sense, but Dr. Ambrose suggested an MRI. He thought the sinus infection had worsened. He had wanted to take a better look at her sinuses. Carla was claustrophobic, so she talked him in to ordering a CT scan instead. When the doctor walked out to schedule the appointment for the following day, Carla and I calmly discussed how that was all it must be, a sinus infection that had worsened. We left with no worries, and I dropped her off at dance practice. Her first competition was in 2 days on Saturday. The next morning, Friday, I drove Carla to school in the pouring rain. Later, I had to pull her out of school in the middle of the rally so we could make the appointment for her CT scan. My youngest, Cole, came along. It seemed like we were finished in no time and on our way home. I remember how quiet the car ride was, with only the sound of rain outside. We stopped at a coffee shop to eat when I noticed that Carla was having trouble swallowing her food. I asked if she needed some water, and she said, "No, I've been having problems swallowing." That was the first time I remember actually being worried. She was fine for the rest of the meal, but I couldn't take my eyes off her while she was eating, and I lost my own appetite. On the way back to school for Carla's dance practice, we decided to stop at the salon near our house so we can get her nails done before the competition the next day. We were about a mile away when the phone rang. It was Dr. Ambrose. Moving on to Chapter 2. Before my mind could process what was happening, Dr. Ambrose told me that I needed to bring Carla back for an MRI, either now or in the morning. I started to explain that Carla's first dance competition was in the morning, but then he cut me off. "Mrs. Rosen," he said sternly, "Carla will not be going to her dance competition." I began to feel panic and pulled into the grocery store parking lot. A light drizzle was still falling. Carla was listening to my side of the conversation from the back seat. "They found a mass on her nervous system," Dr. Ambrose continued. "It's very serious. Go home and I will call you there in 15 minutes. As I hung up, I heard Carla ask, "Mom, what is it? What does this mean? What's wrong with me?" Still not believing it myself, I told her, "They found something. They need us to go back now for an MRI. Tears ran down her cheeks. She looked as if she had almost been expecting it. Days later, Carla recounted her thoughts at the moment in her journal. So let me stop right there. When I refer to the journal, I didn't find her journal until the end. So when I read this journal, I was able to put it into the book. So in her words exactly, all in caps, she wrote, "I don't think that I have ever been that scared in my life." Then she goes on to regular upper lower. I was, of course, bawling because I didn't know what to think. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably, and I remember I kept asking, "Mom, what does this mean? What does this mean?" That ride to the hospital was miserable. I was feeling so many emotions that I have never felt before. After all, I had never been scared for my life before. The trip to the hospital seemed to take forever. On the way, I called Rick and a few family members. We didn't really know anything yet for sure, and I didn't want to panic anyone unnecessarily. Carla called her two closest friends, Natalie and Courtney, even though Michael and I thought she should wait until we knew more. We heard Carla sobbing in the back seat as she spoke to them, and to my surprise, I can even hear from her phone that they were crying too. I had felt a little relief talking to my friends because they mean the world to me. And that whole time, I wish I could have run up and given them a hug, a giant hug. I felt so empty without those hugs. Tim, throughout our podcast, I'm going to be sharing a little bit here and there from the book as it relates to our learned wisdoms. My book is 31 chapters from the heart. I did some takeaways. And just like today's, draw upon your own life experience, personal strengths, and talents to impact another person's journey. And I truly believe, Tim, that through the foundation for 18 and a half years and what you and I are embarking on now through this next journey of Let It Be, I believe we're both using our strengths and talents, gifts. So I'd like to ask our friends as well as you, Tim, do you think your life has purpose?
That's a good question. And I think people don't often think about it enough or contemplate. Definitely with me not having a close relationship with God like you do, I'm sure that our answers would be quite different. It's interesting when you're young, you think like, the whole world's ahead of you, and my life is like something big, like out of a comic book or a movie. And then the older we get, it's like still waiting for those superpowers to evolve and learn how to fly or whatever. But I live my life every day with the purpose of making my dog's life awesome, making my wife's life awesome. How can I be of service to them to give them a good life as well?
So, do you believe, Tim, that everyone is born with a unique talent, or do talents develop through passion and efforts?
I think that they develop. You're surrounded by a certain life with your parents or your siblings or your friends that you choose, and you might be drawn to some, skill or hobby or whatever. But I definitely think that people develop. What do you believe?
I believe that we are all born with gifts, talents, purpose. And the closer we get to God, the more we can see what those are. And what I truly believe what you and I are doing together is part of the plan. You said yes to joining me on the journey. And we haven't even talked about that yet. I'd love to share with our friends and how we even came to this podcast. As I was winding down with the foundation, which I had no idea I would be closing the doors to the foundation, because we truly helped thousands of kids and families. And you'll meet some of them coming up soon, Tim, as we talk to some of our families on some future episodes. I knew that God was not done with me. He would not take me through these journeys, these paths, let me feel like I was living my purpose, and then to live happily ever after in retirement life? I think not. You know me. I'm not done. I remember I finished the last foundation fundraiser, and I came home and I had started thinking about the podcast. It had already been laid on my heart, and I didn't know. I kept saying, "Really, God?" I tried this a little bit with Mike Conrad, who has helped us with some technical, and we love you, Mike. So I was spending a day in bed reflecting back on the last foundation fundraiser and all the years. I was very emotional, exhausted both physically and emotionally. Michael went down to work, and I just had the whole day to myself. I stayed in my pajamas all day. And then it was you. I said, podcast. I think it's Tim. And I thought about it and prayed about it. And then I reached out to you later that week and said, "Hey, can we talk?" Well, normal Tim fashion, you are getting better, but texting back like a day or two later, "Yeah, okay." And I remember sitting in the Del Taco parking lot, and because you finally called me back, and I said, I have something to share with you. It's not going to make sense because it doesn't really make sense to me either, but just trust me. And you're laughing. And I said, and don't interrupt me because I just need to get it all out. And I started talking, and I said, and I think I'm supposed to do a podcast next. And well, Tim, I think you're supposed to be doing it with me. You said, okay. And I said, but don't respond. I was afraid you were going to say no. Do you remember what I asked you?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I said, let's talk again. And I want you, if you can, to pray about it or think about it, because I didn't know really where you still are with prayer. And you said, I need to talk to Bethany. And the nice Ruth came out, and I said, could you not talk to Bethany about it? Can you just sit with it and see what your thoughts are before you share it with her? And you said, okay. Whether you did that, I don't know. That doesn't matter. It was like over 2 weeks later, Tim Tackett, that you finally wanted to talk to me about it with no indication, nothing. You were just like silent. And my son Brandon once told me that no response is the response. So that was going rampant through my heart and mind. Like, oh my gosh, if Tim doesn't want to do it, am I still supposed to do this? He's going to say no. And you finally said, let's talk. And you said,
Let's do it.
I'm all
Yeah.
in.
Yep. I'm
And
all
I
in.
was like, woohoo. But Tim, we can't talk about this until the foundation. I need proper closure and that process. And you, Tim, we're in a busy season. What does November and December in your world look like?
Oh man, the grocery world during the holidays. Yeah, that's just pure fun madness. And I want to add to the story a little bit too, because to why I said yes. And, whether you think it's spiritual or religious, you can put any tag on it you want. But the first time I tried to call you, I called your cabin in Arrowhead.
But we hadn't talked about it yet then.
No, we
That
hadn't.
was. Mhm.
But the way that everything happened, pulling off the Bible, pulling off your book, reading your book, I called your cabin
Talk
thinking
to
I was calling
Michael.
you, and Michael happened to be there. Michael and I don't have a relationship really, but I happened to get him and we talked.
That's awesome. And that day he was praying to be more connected and have better family relationships. And you call him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
It
so
was just a beautiful day.
what some people call random, and
I say not
others
coincidence at all.
exactly. And so as I look back and I thought about all those moments that happened, I couldn't say no. It didn't make any sense. And so just like everything that happened along the way had purpose, I really believe that this podcast is going to have a lot of wonderful purpose for the guests that we bring in, the nonprofits that we talk about.
Just bringing hope and encouragement. And I'm just so excited because there's so many beautiful stories out there. And just like I've started reading our story with Carla, everybody has a story. And we want to share that. We want to bring hope and encouragement through people's stories and their learned wisdoms. There's so many. We just can't wait to get started. So, going back to the book a little bit, I want to finish. It's not the full chapter, of course, of chapter 2, but I wanted to read and finish that so our listeners know. After he arranged for us to see a neurologist at Children's Hospital Los Angeles in the morning, Dr. Ambrose told us, there's nothing they could do for us here tonight. So you might as well go home, be with your family, get some rest, and head over there first thing in the morning. Go home and rest? Be with your family? All I could think about was, could Carla die right now? Carla drove home with Michael and Pastor Mike while I drove home with Amber. We cried and we prayed together. By the time we got home, Rick was there. We were all numb, not knowing what to say to one another. As we gathered in the kitchen and the den, we just sat there, speechless. Then all of a sudden, Carla blurted out, "Anyone hungry?" We all laughed, but no one was hungry except for Carla.
That does sound like her. She always brought levity and fun and humor to just every situation. I remember one of my favorite memories of Carla, one that just kind of keeps me going, is when you guys came to visit in Snohomish, and we were gonna we had a sports court at the time, right? Before pickleball was
So
pickleball.
fun. Before pickleball was pickleball.
and this was, I mean, this was 30 something years ago. And so we were gonna play a trick on her. And we were going to clean the sports court, and she was going to take half and I was going to take the other half, and we were going to, make it a competition. And Mom says, "You should get the blower and go out there and use the blower." And I was like, "Oh, that's going to be so funny. Let's do that." So I go down there and I'm like getting ready, and all of a sudden I hear this brrr, and here comes Carla, and she's got the blower, and it's like, wait a minute, and just a smile on her face, and it was just, it's such a great memory.
So sometimes impact can be the simple thing of a smile. It doesn't have to be something so profound or something so huge. And I ask, what kind of impact are you leaving on people around you?
And what kind of impact do you have the opportunity to give to people? If you're going about your day and you're caught up in your daily swirl, think about how many interactions with others you have. Wherever you might be, there is an opportunity to have an impact on someone, like you said, Ruthe, with a smile or a hello or good morning.
The Christian meaning of impact is about living a life that reflects Christ's love. It's about using the gifts, opportunities, and relationships God has given to make a meaningful difference for His glory and for the good of others. So one of the things, as we are getting near wrapping up our first episode, Tim, I think it's important that we share with our friends what they can expect.
Well, we're definitely going to be diving into the learned wisdoms from your book and talking more about that, because the message that one can take from those learned wisdoms is going to have an impact on their journey. And so I think understanding that we are all going through something at any given moment, and we can all relate with one another.
Tim, I think no matter the story shared, the learned wisdom, they are going to fall into one of those categories always. Surrendering, faith, acceptance, understanding. They're all meanings of let it be. I will never forget something one of my old pastors said: faith begins when facts end.
So not every episode is going to be like this. We are going to have guests on here who are going to share their learned wisdoms, and we're going to also highlight some nonprofits that we're really passionate about.
Super excited about that. I can't stop. That was my world.
And I think it's so vital to the mission of Let It Be podcast and just being able to help the cause.
And scripture. We'll never leave an episode without wrapping up with a scripture that fits our focus of the episode. So, Tim, I would love to read that scripture.
I'd love to hear it.
So I went back to one of my favorite verses that actually got me through so many years of pain and hope. And it's from Isaiah 40:29-31. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Shortly after losing Carla, somebody, I don't even know who, sent me this candle, and it had this verse on it, and it sat by my bedside, and I would only light it every now and again because I didn't want it to go away. And that verse carried me. I thought I would never move from the house that Carla lived, ran through, played, swam in the pool. I thought I'd always have that house. But as we made the decision to move and let go for change, This candle barely had just a little bit of the wick showing. So part of the letting go process, Tim, I wrote a note with some prayers to the new homeowners, and I lit that candle, and I walked out the door, and I let it burn out there. I think something else we have for our listeners is always you, and this, actually, we talked about this in our first phone call. I said, Tim, you love music, and I see music in our episodes, but we can't play music because that's infringement. But we can always recommend a song because you are so good at it. You have a song for us, Tim?
One by Bill Withers, who is one of my favorite artists, and he does a rendition of Let It Be. And we actually have started a playlist on Spotify. It's called Let It Be Podcast. I use music all the time to motivate me, whether I'm working in the yard or driving or cooking. My range, as far as what I like to listen to, is everything. And so we're going to be recommending some songs that people will really love or be like, what is this song?
Just a recommendation. And you know, something about music that has always stuck with me. One time we were talking about a song, and you had said how you love dancing in the kitchen with Bethany. And this was one of the songs that had come up. And I just said, oh, you're such a romantic. Another awesome quality about you. So
the other song that's dropped, sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry. No.
The other song that I dropped in there is City of New Orleans by Willie Nelson. I love that song, and Willie Nelson's so cool.
He is very cool. And thank you, Brother Tim. So I think that we are wrapping up our first episode. I know there's so much more to talk about.
Do you want to direct people to our website?
Yes, we have a brand new website, letitbepodcast.com, where you can respond to an episode, have questions that we could answer, also maybe share your story, because we all have a story, and just connect with us, and maybe they'll end up being a guest as well. We have an Instagram, letitbe.podcast.
So as we continue with the podcast, let us know your thoughts. Send us your suggestions. What would you like to see? What do you want to discuss? Like Ruthe said, everyone's got a story to tell, and we really want to hear it. Right now, at this moment in your journey, how are you drawing on your experiences and impacting others? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're so happy you're here.
Until next time, goodbye, friends.
Did today's episode give you a little boost of hope and encouragement right when you needed it? If it did, we'd love it if you'd hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe even share it with someone who could use a little light today. For extra content and more from this podcast, make sure to follow us at Instagram at letitbe.podcast. And remember, there's still beauty unfolding in your story.